Well, where's the data? When we think about what we've been doing over the last 5, 6 years, we've been focusing a lot on customer experience, we're focusing a lot on applications. We're here to talk about APIs, it's API days. And there's a lot of activity that we've gone through to really speed up those processes and deliver better customer experiences. But one of the frontiers that we really haven't conquered yet is the data space, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about. But more specifically, how do we really drive business growth with a unified and real-time data? Because this is really the next frontier. In fact, one of our customers, Verizon, they describe real-time data as being like air. So they can't survive without it, and I think that's where we're going to wind up being for most organizations down the track. Now, I'm going to start with some equations. So you have an idea, and we do some development. And usually for all ideas in business these days, it has to have some sort of technology intervention, right? So we do that, but when we really get value out of that idea or out of that application or that area that we've developed is when we add the data. And if you think, well, maybe not, maybe the development's a bit more important. How many times have you showed off your latest creation only to say, of course, it'll look better when there's data in it, right? Or we have a business model that is, a new area that we're going into, but we can't actually deliver or start to show that value until users start using it and we get information into it, and then we can show the analytics that are coming out of it. Data is such a key part, and it's not to take away any value at all from the idea or the development side. It's just that we multiply that when we add it with data. So it's such a key part of what we need to do in our application space and in our API space. Now, the other part of the equation is this one. When you take data and you multiply it with the inverse of time, so for those who need a high school maths refresher, if I have a small amount of time, it makes that number bigger, which makes the impact bigger. We actually get a better customer experience. And I'll give you an example. So a couple of months ago, I was taking the kids to Disneyland. Went on website, booked flights. The company that I was booking with, which I won't reveal the name, gave me hotel options. Would you like to book a hotel? Yes, I would. But none of those options that came up was a hotel that either suited me, suited my family, or suited anything else that had to do with choosing a hotel. So left the site, went to a different website and booked the hotel. A few days later, we get an email. And in that email is from that airline, here are some other hotel recommendations. And guess what? One of those hotel recommendations was the one that we booked at a cheaper price. Now, you would think that this would have a positive impact on customer experience, but actually it was negative, right? Because I don't know what it's like in your house, but in my house, my wife saw that and she got immediately annoyed. Not because it was a cheaper price, but because of now what that cheaper price now represented in terms of work. I have to go back now and go back to that hotel, and do I have to call them in the US and try and cancel it? And are they going to give me a penalty, and can I even get the same rate, and all those kinds of things? There's hours and hours of work. So from a customer experience perspective, it was terrible. Now, if we shorten that time frame, if I was able to be shown that at the time we were booking the flight, something that was personal to us, the customer experience wouldn't have just been better, the customer experience would have been barbecue better. What do I mean by barbecue? That's when I go to a barbecue and I tell all my friends about how great the customer experience was. And that's this multiplying effect, this change. So time, the amount of time that it takes to turn data into information has a huge impact on customer experience. And when you think about markets, especially like Australia, the biggest thing that we're competing for is customers. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in, you're competing for that around customer experience. There's a lot of commentary about financial services, for example, and the propensity of younger customers to switch services based on how good the mobile app is. Right? So customer experience is a real battlefield. The thing is that we, as I said in the opening comments for data, we haven't really solved this problem just yet. We kind of have solved some of these issues with ideation, and with dev. If you think about some of the frameworks that we use now, with ideation, you might do some impact mapping, you might use some other tools to to get the ideas out. For development, we've got frameworks, rapid prototyping, and a number of other things that help us do that. We use methodologies like Agile to speed that up and to help us with dev and with quality, and DevOps, and trying to drive an SRE practice, and all these kinds of things are kind of solve those challenges. But for data and for time, we're still really trying to figure out how to solve it. And if you think about it, we come across, and I've come across a lot of customers, especially in the last few months, who are starting to get to this point where they've said, well, we've developed all our apps and they're in the cloud, but our data is in the data center. And this is a bit of a challenge. So we need to get that data closer to where our app is for all sorts of reasons, for performance, for the time aspect. And time is the other part of it that we really are still working out how to solve. Hands up, who's doing AI ML? Yep, a few hands. Yeah, a few nods. AI ML is an interesting one, right? So training, we kind of have to do offline. It's a batch process, a huge number of records. We're going to go over and over and over again, lots of epics, until we get to our model that we like. But how are you using that model once it's trained? I can tell you how I see some customers doing it. What they do is they then, at another batch, pull out a whole bunch of records, go one by one, executing the model, and then putting the result back. And some days later, I get a hotel recommendation, right? How do we actually use those things in real time? Some of the things that stop us from doing this, right? Applications own data. If you think about it, this kind of goes with the integration between apps. You sit down to have an architectural discussion, you say, I need my CRM system to talk to my billing system. I don't talk about, I need to integrate my customer data with my billing data, right? When we build an application, that application tends to like to own it. We're going to go through an API, and that's the only way to get the data in or out. And that's within that application, and if we've bought it off the shelf, maybe we can or can't change it. Data movement is very heavy. What stops data getting into the cloud? It's big, it's heavy, right? Extraction, transformation, load, batch processes. So we tend to not want to do it too much, right? We don't really want to move data around too much. It gets costly too. The relative location of data to where the app is. So that's what we're talking about. Cloud here, data's in the data center. And in a lot of cases, digital processes, the digital teams get held up by what the legacy application could do. So if you're a startup, you're very lucky because you probably don't have that baggage. But I would bet if you're in banking and finance or telco or retail, you probably have come across this problem where that's how the system does it. And so it kind of creates this data inertia, right? We've got lots of things that we would like to do, but we're not going to be able to do that or not do it in the way that we would like to deliver on the original idea because the data has got this inertia. So the question becomes, well, what do we need to do in order to solve that? How do we fix that? So data agility, how do we achieve this? How do we go from inertia to agility? So a couple of principles. One, we need to figure out how to unify data and applications because if we can reuse data and unify these applications, it gives us a place where we can say, answer that question, where is the data? Well, it's unified, I know where to get it, all right? How do I empower developers to build applications without the concerns for data that we have to deal with today? How big is the database? How many resources does it have? How many transactions per second are you going to need to do? My app right now is doing things which are very easily handled from the performance characteristics of our environment, but all of a sudden it explodes. Have we designed for that? Have we figured out how we're going to do that? So how do we get out of those constraints? And then decide and act in real time. If I can execute an ML model in real time, what does that do for the kinds of things I can deliver for customer experience? Whether that's internal customer or external customer, so maybe recommendations, it's an easy one for us all to understand, but there's internal things that we also need to be able to decide on and act in real time. So a great example, a customer of ours, one of the banks, decided to increase their savings account interest rate by 3 times, right? That's relatively straightforward to do, but all the marketing that needed to go with it That's nice. I'm not sure why I want to go to Zoom. All of the marketing that needed to go with it, that's the thing that actually drives customers to create accounts. That's why they increase the interest rate. But how do I know whether it's working? I can get a report at the end of the week. Well, that's great, but it doesn't help me. It doesn't help me actually fix the anything that I need to do in my marketing to perhaps make that more useful, or maybe change my spot. If I know that I've got a radio spot or a TV spot that's working quite well, let me just get rid of Zoom. There we go. Then I can start to do things like instrumentation. Do you do instrumentation on your infrastructure today? So you probably have Grafana or Splunk or something like that that's giving you real-time instrumentation. What if I could do that instrumentation on my business? Watch in real time that about accounts that are being opened, etc. So this is where we start to get out of thinking about data, and it's kind of a little bit of a play on words with a lowercase d. Oh, we have data, to data and doing it as a service. And this is how we start to bring this into the API world. Right, because we do tend to think about data as data that's sitting in a database versus providing data as a service. So today we think about the application. Application has its interfaces, and then we have application data. And as I was talking to somebody a few minutes ago, that results in a lot of silos of data. And we don't really think about how that data is going to be integrated. We do have data coming out really as a result of our business operation. We do then do the analytical side, and some folks have done some great work out there. People like Snowflake and the like have really pushed ahead the boundaries of things like analytical data, especially in the cloud, and that's our deep lane data. What if we were to flip this upside down? So instead of rebuilding data every single time, if we think about data as being one of our key assets, how do we get that integrated? Once I do that, if I provide that through standard data APIs, I can get my applications to connect to it. I know where it is. I can access it. Security, all those kinds of things are taken care of. And our application is able to use that and maximize the value out of the data that we have in our platforms. And so now what we've got is, instead of data being really a result of our business operation, we're using data to drive our business operation. It's not an architecture track without an architecture diagram. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things in here, but data in any organization is an ecosystem. Nobody has a silver bullet. I'd love to come along and say, as DataStax, we'll solve every single one of your data problems. We're not going to do that. There's some folks that have solved some great things like data warehousing and how do you train AI models and so forth, people like Databricks and the like. What we're really talking about is these areas that are in orange. So if we can establish an operational data layer, what we're really looking at is data that is integrated and optimized for application usage. We need somewhere to put that. API enabled. So as application developers, how many of you really enjoy writing SQL statements? Or optimizing a query, building a store procedure, any of those kinds of things? We don't really like that, right? We prefer to work with APIs. So if you're going to start to provide this operational data layer and make it available as a service, it has to be provided with APIs. For read and write, and I've put a little asterisk there because there's a big debate as to whether the writes should go straight into an operational data store or via the application that needs to do validation and other things. Let's just say there are circumstances where you can write directly and others where you're going to need to go via the source app, but it is certainly possible. Cloud native. Where are our apps? Apps are in the cloud, so all of our data, this operational data store needs to be in the cloud as well and done natively. You don't want to manage the infrastructure for this, right? So we want to take it as a service, and it has to be fast. So why does it have to be fast? And we're talking about millisecond response times here for reading out this data. If I have an operational data store, I have a lot of data that's in there. This is about enhancing the customer experience. I don't enhance the customer experience if I bring all that data together and now we slow down the mobile app, or we slow down our web app, or whatever the case may be. So whatever we do, performance is absolutely a critical factor in here. And as an example, a couple of customers that we're working with who have a customer 360 project that they've had running for a long, long time, that data has been added to over time. And as that happens, the whole system is slowing down. And as that's slowing down, all of the applications that were attached to it are also slowing down. So they've kind of gone part of that way by integrating the data into this Customer 360 view. And now they've got to deal with the performance side. And somewhat, that's an area where we're going to help them. And it needs to be always available. If this is going to be a key part where we have the data coming from, it can't be down. I think, for most of us in business, being down at any time is not good, so it's probably stating a little bit of the obvious, but having a high availability component is required. To complete this as a service, we need to go into event streaming. Why event streaming? Event streaming is the piece that lets us shrink the time down. So I said before, what if I could execute a ML model in real time? This is how we can do it, right? So we can pick up events in real time, push them through a function and execute an ML model in real time as that's flowing through. So if I think about the airline example earlier, as they're picking up my stream of data coming out from where my mouse is tracking around the website and clicking on, using my often flyer data, being able to push that through a ML model and give me back hotel recommendations that are more suited to me. We can do that in real time before I've completed my airline or flight booking. And that's how we start to get into this real-time space. This is how we can instrument. I can take that data and now instrument it with a Grafana or instrument it with some other tooling that allows us to be able to surface that up and watch the dials move on our business. So in-stream processing is huge. Diverse protocol support, we need to. Most of us are not in a green field. If you're a startup, again, maybe you are, but most of us are not operating in a green field. So we have things like JMS still getting around, Rabbit, MQ, MQ series and the like. So how do I have all of those applications start to participate in this event streaming place? Because we need to, right? This is the data that's in motion, and this is the data, this is part of our data service, a core part of our data service. So if I break these down, when we were talking about those equations before in time and data, this is how we start to solve this. So in the data side, that operational data layer, this is going to answer that question, where is the data? We know where to get it. We have an API layer to go get it from. It's very fast. We don't have to worry about performance. I can build an app directly against it and have it scale. On the time side, using event streaming, dealing with data and analyzing it or acting on it as it happens is critical. And so these are the two components that fit in there. If you'd like to know how we're helping all of these kinds of organisations solve these kinds of problems, you can come and visit us at the booth. Otherwise, at 4:40, my esteemed colleague who's up the back, Christian, will be doing a workshop where I think he's going to show a couple of things like how to build a TikTok clone pretty quick and perhaps a few other things in real time and live. So come along and join us. Otherwise, I'll open for questions or...
Yeah, thank you, Warren. Any questions in the room?